I will be forever the myth.
You're the king of kings,
There's always a pecking order. The little peckers never mess with the big pecker. So I'm a rooster, and he's a chicken, so to speak.
All right, welcome back to the Bodybuilding Legends Show, and I have a very special show this week. On April 14th of this week, unfortunately, we lost a real guru in the industry. Bob Gruskin passed away on April 14th this week, and we've got some of his students here, some of the great bodybuilders that Bob mentored over the years, and we're going to do kind of a little tribute to Bob Gruskin. Let me introduce everybody. We got Tom Terwilliger, an IFBB pro bodybuilder. And then we've got Jerry Scalisi, former Mr. Universe, calling from New York. We got Richard Palatano, who is a good friend of Bob, and he's calling from Florida. And then finally, we got John Defendis, 1988 Mr. USA. And all you guys have been mentored by Bob, and your careers have been influenced by him. So, Tom, let's start with you. You're in Colorado now, but you're originally from New York. How did you first meet Bob Gruskin?
Well, I tell you something. It's interesting because I heard some stories recently about Bob, and John Defendis was kind enough to really do a great tribute for John on his Facebook page. It had well over, and he may be able to update me on this, but it had well over 300 comments. I was like 360, 400. Wow. Is insane. And as I was reading some of those comments, it was just extraordinary how many lives Bob Gruskin touched. And as I read through some of those stories, I began to realize, I said, you know what? That's my story. His story is my story, and his story is my story. And Bob, he had this way of bringing people together and connecting them. And in many respects, that's what happened with John and I and many of the other champion bodybuilders that he was mentoring. But I believe, and again, it's hard to remember exactly when because it was so early on. I was a teenager. I was competing in probably some of the most I don't want to call them prestigious. They weren't terribly prestigious, but the most popular competitions of the day on the East Coast, which the Mr. Suburban, the Colonial America, all these competitions were like the pinnacle. If you were there and you did well, you were competing with the best. And I think I met Bob at one of those competitions, and he introduced himself as he did with so many young athletes. He says, "Hey, kind of like a kid thing. You've got a lot of potential, kid. You know what I mean? Where you're from, and got a little information, and found out I was training at a place called Future Man Gym with a guy named Tony Pandolfo and some of these other great champions that were on the East Coast at that time, and showed up at the gym one time and just, we started chatting, became friends, and then he showed up one day as I was training for the Teenage Metropolitan Championship. He showed up with this guy, and I'll never forget the day. The guy, Bob walks in and says, hello, and he introduces me to this guy. The guy had this skin-tight leather jacket on. He looked like a badass, right? And Bob says, this is John Defendis. He's your competition at the upcoming Teen Metropolitan Championship. Let me tell you something. I shrunk. I went back into the locker room, went home, and never wanted to come back. So Bob was gifted at motivating people, at connecting people, and making young athletes feel like they were special, like they had something. His eye, if you caught his eye, and he had a little belief in you, you believed in yourself. So the exact meaning, how it happened, I don't know, but the one I do remember the most is the introduction to John Defendis via Bob Gruskin at Future Man Gym. And that was probably back in, what was that, John? Probably 77? 77. Wow, yeah. Crazy, man.
Jerry, how about you? You and Bob go way back. I know he was a big influence on your career. When's the first time you met him?
We'll bring John into this again. I was training for the Colonial America, and the night before, I don't know, it was my first show, and a good friend of mine knew John from Hicksville, and John invited me to come to his brother's deli. I came there about 10 o'clock at night. Went into the back, like I said, the fire was still on at the stove, and John gave me a posing routine in the back of the deli while the fire was going on. And So, the next day I went to Colonial America. I took third place, my first teenage show, and Bob
Lost
called me.
on his posing.
And, Bob called me and said, Johnny told me you're pretty good. And from there, that's where it started, I think it was 1978, I think. Yes, 1978 that was. And, the rest is history. And just me and Bob formed the bond. And, like I said, he was like a father figure, a mentor. He was the myth, the man, the legend.
Yeah. The original, man.
Put it that way. And he was the master of illusion, too. And, it's like I said, it's surreal that he's gone. It's like, you still might want to call that 882 number 718 to the Bronx.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bob touched a lot of lives. And like I said, it wasn't just bodybuilding. It was just about life.
Yeah.
Right.
And, it's sad that he's gone, but his memories last on forever.
Right.
And there's so many. It's just not us four, and there's like 500 more, maybe more.
Yeah.
And so that's how we met.
Richard, how about you? Tell us about when you first met Bob.
I met Bob in 1983. I was a senior in high school, and I was competing in the Metropolitan Championships. Tommy, you were there, I believe.
Yeah.
The year that you won the Men's Open.
That would have been. That's right. That was after I had come back, took off a few years, came back, and so you won. Did you win, or you were competing in it? Did you win?
I competed against Vinny Conzo, the beast from the East. When I saw Vinny, I was like, okay, what am I doing here? I got last. It happens. It happens to a lot of guys in their first competitions. Vinny Conzo was a monster as a teenager. And Bob came up to me during the pump-up room. We were talking a little bit, and we just kept in touch. And I really started working seriously with Bob in 1986. I was getting ready for the East Coast. I won the heavyweight class at the East Coast. I was only, I think, 20 years old, maybe. Yeah, about 20 years old. I won the heavyweights at the East Coast. And then he started prepping me for some other shows. And I did really well. I did really well under Bob. Great friendship, father figure, mentor, and a life coach.
Mm-hmm.
He helped me make a lot of decisions, especially when it came to walking away from the sport, because I had a job opportunity. And I was getting ready for the 1990 or 1989 Mr. America. Everyone wants to be Mr. America when you're a kid.
Right.
So I had just taken third in the tall class at the USA, and Jerry guest posed at that show. Was in Chicago, AAU Junior USA, I think, or Junior America. Junior America?
Yeah, Junior America.
Junior America. And I was going to get ready for the America a few months later. And then I got the phone call from the police academy. You've been hired. You need to report in August. And here I am getting ready for the Mr. America, my dream show. And I had to make that decision. I said, Bob, what should I do? And he said, well, you can go in the show and take your chances and possibly win, or you can take the job, which is going to guarantee you a 20-year career and a pension and benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Once you become Mr. America, what's next? How long can you ride that train before the next generation comes up and you're not that guy anymore?
Right.
And it was a decision. I beat myself up for years over it, but I made the right decision. But I always still followed bodybuilding. I stayed in touch with Bob almost 35 years now.
Wow, no kidding. Wow.
I've helped him judge shows, the NABBA USA. I stayed involved with that. It's been a nice ride with him. He was really an inspiration to me, a father figure. I always called him my Jewish dad. He was my Jewish dad.
Hey, John Defendis, let's hear from you. I know that Steve Mihalik was a big inspiration in your career. He was a big coach, but Bob Gruskin also was, right?
I was just Steve's punching bag. Bob was really Steve, see, I was the only one stupid enough to keep coming back. Usually somebody trained with Steve one time and they'd never come back. The guy was Mr. America. I wanted to be Mr. America. I grew up in a very goal-oriented home. My dad was a bodybuilder. My brother was a two-time All-American National Wrestling Champion and Coach Dan Gable's camp. And so I grew up in an atmosphere of champions and, you know, that mindset. So I felt if I wanted to be Mr. America, I had to go find Mr. America and find out what he did to get there, you know. What I found out is a couple trips to the hospital and get the crap beat out of me. And my mother forbid me to go back, and I kept going back. So, but really, Bob, you had Steve and you had Bob. Steve literally twice a day, every day for almost 5 years, beat the shit out of me. And Bob was the yin to the yang. He was the guy that kept me alive, you know. Steve would tell me to do something, and I'd go back to Bob and say, Bob, should I do this? And Bob would be like, no, you're out of your mind. That'll kill you, you know. So I have to say that Bob, not only like the other guys, not only was Bob my mentor, my father, my coach, my cheerleader, but he was the guy who kept me alive and kept me making the right decisions, you know. You know, I met Bob in the mid 70s when I competed in the Teenage America, and I had told the story before that where he came up to me. I got my ass blown off the stage, and I was sitting in the cheap seats, and Bob came over and sat next to me, and he said, you know, how you doing, kid? And I kind of looked at him like, who are you, you know? He said, you know, you got some potential there, you know? And I said, what? The judges didn't think so, you know? And so he grabbed my arm, and I pulled my arm away. What are you doing? He said, see what kind of shape you're in, you know? See if you know what you got there.
See what you got.
So I was kind of rude to him, you know? And then we got to talking, and then he said, well, you know, I'm a photographer. I write for the magazines. It's amazing how quick you go from pulling your arm away to, really? How you doing there, mister? You know? And so, you know, Bob befriended me, and he became, you know, my mentor, my coach, you know, my advisor, you know, just like Richie says, you know, he really gave us good advice. And the most important advice that he gave all of us was that bodybuilding wasn't a career, you know, that you can want to be Mr. America and you can go after that goal and you can put all your heart and soul into it, but you had to have the backup plan. You had to have something that was solid, okay? And, you know, so he made us understand that right away from the very beginning, you know. And, you know, going back to the first time Bob introduced me to the Terwilliger guy, you know, Tommy played this off. He was a big, scary guy and everything. What Tommy doesn't tell you is several weeks later, he blew my ass off the stage at the Metropolitan.
Wow.
He won the teenage. I took second. Tommy took fourth in the open. I took fifth. And it was at that contest that I realized I had work to do, you know. Tommy had incredible legs, incredible posing routine, great charisma. And I knew I had to go back and work really hard. And I did. And I came back and I won the teenage Metropolitan and the overall Mr. Metropolitan the next year. I'm the only teenager to ever have been able to do that. I was blessed to have that, you know, opportunity. And then, you know, Tommy didn't win it for a few years after that, but we'll talk about that.
I was busy building motorcycles and riding with Outlaws. Yeah, I had better things to do, man. Of course, Bob wasn't happy about that. He knew that I had taken a path that wasn't the best path that, I could choose. And he always tried to mentor me out of that direction. And I will say this, after those 5 years that I took a layoff, and John and Jerry were excelling. They were, competing in these shows and just doing so well. And I was watching it happen while I was sitting back building the best bike on the block, you know. But if it wasn't for Bob Gruskin and his early mentorship, and later on knowing that, hey, you know what, this is not the lifestyle I should be in. I need to move. I need to get back to what I was doing to those fundamentals. It was Bob in many respects, that and one other mentor, Tony Pandolfo, and of course, my belief in God and my great parents, but certainly Bob had such a great influence because he was like that. Every one of you talked about this, is that it wasn't just, in fact, the least of it was the bodybuilding coaching. Most of it was the life coaching. He was preparing us to be men, to go out into the real world and to be something. He knew that bodybuilding was just the start of that. Bodybuilding was a way for us to learn to believe in ourselves and that to set goals and to achieve those goals and to know that we're going to run into obstacles. In fact, John, we've all had this experience where Bob, even when he knew, I think, we can't be sure, but I think he knew we weren't going to win this particular contest, but we were encouraged to go anyway, just so we could get our asses handed to us a little bit, just so we could to learn the lesson, because you can be great. You can be a great champion. You can have great legs. You can have great this, that, and the other thing. But if you don't know how to lose, you can't be a champion. And Bob knew that was such an important lesson in those early teen years, man. And he created those lessons for us.
And he pitted us against each other, but not in a vicious way. He was very sly about it, you know. He would have us compete against each other, but he would just be, you know, he was like, he was there for all of us, but he knew one of us was going to get our ass kicked, and that was going to be a lesson, you know. Another thing, too, is one thing I got to say, you know, Bob was very, very selective with who he worked with. And people say Bob looked for great potential, but I think it was beyond a person's physical potential. I think what Bob looked for was people who had heart, people who cared. They were good people. When you look at this incredible team of athletes that Bob coached, you know, going from Richie, Jerry, Tommy, you know, all these great champions, you know, Chris Aceto and, Matt Dufresne, but
Jeff King, Matt Mendenhall. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on.
But it's the list is ridiculous. Richie Beretta, you got Joe Miko. I mean, it goes on and on. And I realized that yesterday. I mean, I knew it was big, but then you start to really think about it, you know, and the list goes on and on. But the one thing that we all had in common, we all had a heart, we all cared, and we all hurt, and we all felt, and we all looked out for each other and everybody around us. We all developed, if we had a good part of it, we had good hearts, but Bob developed those hearts so that we would be great champions that cared about people and cared to help other people, you know? That's Bob. I mean, you know, when people say, wow, you know, you really care about people, like, I think about it. Well, yeah, you know what? Because I was brought up the right way, like Tommy says, with great parents, but Bob taught us so many lessons just by his actions. He didn't have to tell us, you need to do this. We just watched what he did and said, oh, okay, that's what we got to do. We got to care about other people, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, Jerry, I hear about Bob saying to almost everybody, you got great genetics, you got great potential. How do you think he knew that? How do you think he was able to pick you guys out, all these champions that he had, and figure out who had the great potential?
Well, I was just saying to someone yesterday, I said, if you look around, everybody had legs that Bob worked with.
Yeah.
Everybody.
I don't know, not one person that didn't have legs. But like John said, we just wasn't the bodybuilding. Like, you could pay him $1 million. If he don't want to work with you, he didn't work with you.
No. And
he worked with a certain select people. You know, like John said, people that cared about other people, didn't cause havoc. And he had that eye. He had that, you know, he can turn. I tell people, I used to go over his house Monday. By Friday, you'd look in that small mirror and magic happened.
Yes.
And he was like the wizard. and it was just unbelievable. It's like, it's hard to explain. They know, it's just hard to explain to someone. And people would go, what did he do? And I would say, I just listened. I never questioned him.
Yeah.
You know,
Bob spent every dime he had on us.
Yep.
He didn't make money. All these guys today, everybody's got to make a buck. Everyone's got to make a buck. It's all money. Bob never asked for anything. And I have to tell you that I think in the final days, what really killed Bob was Bob did not have the capacity to have anybody help him. You know, he was a caregiver. He did not want anybody to be responsible. He did not want to be a burden to anybody. And when I spoke to him about 5 days before he passed away, I could tell this guy, he's given up in his heart, because he would rather die than have somebody have to take care of him than be a burden.
That's true.
Wow. You know, I want to touch base on something real quick that Jerry mentioned, that Bob had such a great, and I don't know if we can call it an eye or an intuition, and it wasn't about just the genetics or the musculature or the legs, whatever it might be, although that was a commonality certainly. But he had an eye for, we're calling it an eye for, and you know, since I'm referring to myself as well as the incredible abundant amount of people and champions that he worked with, an eye for good people with good hearts. And I think in many respects, one of the things that's really come to light for me is, and you don't really learn to understand this, recognize it, or appreciate it early on, but I do now. I certainly recognize it now, that the only way to know that is not an eye, it's not a hint, it's not something someone does per se, is that you have to be that person. If you don't resonate as the person who is good and caring and a nurturer and a giver, as you say, as Bob was, then you can't possibly resonate with other people that feel that, have that in them. That's what he had. He had something, it was almost like an electricity that he knew, he recognized it because he resonated with it. It was who he was. And in many respects, it's who we all wanted to become. Bob, for those who are watching who don't know Bob, have never seen Bob, he was a little Jewish professor, Brooklyn professor. I mean, just a little guy with thick glasses and just probably the most unassuming man you will ever see in your life. But at the same time, in many respects, and I think you guys can agree, we all wanted to be like Bob. He was a good person. He was a giver. He was a carer. It was something, there was a strength about him that we didn't even recognize then, but we wanted. This is why we listened. This is why we got in front of that puny little bathroom mirror in the basement and we saw magic happen, because this guy with this heart and this spirit believed in us. And it electrified us, man.
Not only that, Tommy, but we all, that moment where it was time to get in front of that mirror, it was, oh my God, what's Bob gonna think?
We better be ready.
Yeah.
You know, everything came down to what was gonna come out of Bob's mouth, because you knew, one, that it was gonna be brutally honest. He was gonna tell you the truth. You know, he didn't care. He didn't mince words. Hey, he wasn't getting paid. He wasn't there to give us, you know, blow a bunch of bullshit, you know? And, you know, like I had said also, where I trained a whole year for the USA, and 6 weeks before the contest, Bob came down to Florida and he took a lead. I was all excited. You know, I trained a whole year. I was in the best shape of my life. And I couldn't wait for him to look at me. And I stripped down in my posing trunks, and, you know, he had me do quarter turns and, you know, looked at me a couple shots, and he said, okay. And I said, well, you know, what do you think? He says, you know, I remember he adjusted his little pens in his pocket there. And, well, you know, we'll talk over dinner, you know. And he said, we'll talk over dinner. I'm like, we'll talk. And he walked away.
Yeah.
We go to dinner. I'm waiting. I'm expecting, hey, man, you got a good shot to win the show. And Bob said, I said, well, you know, Bob, what do you think? And he, well, I think maybe we should wait a year and train for next year. I swear, I can't be honest. You know, and it was because my hamstrings were weak. You know, I'd done these 60 set leg workouts with Mahalik for years, and after the 60 sets, he'd leave the gym and say, do hamstrings, and he was gonna come back and do them later. I'd do a half a set of leg curls, and I follow him. As soon as I seen his car drive away, I was out the door, you know. Hey, I'll be honest with you, 60 sets of hard legs with Mahalik, the last thing you want to do is, you got an option to get out the door, you're out the door. You know what? I'm not so this big tough guy that says, no, I crawled out the door after he left. And it was those workouts, those hamstring workouts that I missed, that I had to make up for the last 6 weeks. So I was training almost every single night at 3 o'clock in the morning, just hamstrings. So I was training at 7 in the morning to 8:30. I was training again at 8 o'clock at night. I was working full day. So I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, train hamstrings, and then go home, eat, and then train again at 7, you know? And my hamstrings were not my best body part for the USA, but I had everything, so I was able to win the show. When you're standing next to Rennell John VA's hamstrings, I don't care if you're Lee Haney, I don't care if you're the greatest bodybuilders around could not stand next to Rennell when it came to glutes and hamstrings.
Yeah, no chance, man.
So
hey guys, I have to finish that. I got to share this story with you because
please.
All you guys are lifers like me. It's very hard to walk away from this,
right?
As much as you sometimes do. And I'll just tell you a little story. After the Teenage USA, I was turning 20. So Bob says, "Do you want to go down? We're going to go down to Maryland to hit a show." And you never questioned Bob. You just, you loved it. You just wanted to show yourself off, and you never questioned Bob. So we go to Penn Station, and we get on a train, and we're going down to Maryland. So we get off, we take a cab to this place, the venue. So the venue is the Moose Lodge or the VFW Hall, one of the two. So I would imagine today's guy who'd say, "Oh, what the fuck is this?" But we just looked at each other, and I didn't say, "Oh, what do we come?" And we just, that was it. We walked into this place. It was a VFW Hall. So they had like a full crowd there, whatever they could fit. So we were pumping up in the back of where the beer was, cases of beer, the bar, in the back of those rooms. And we're pumping up. So the backdrop was just like a black curtain. And then when you walked out to pose, there was like, I can't even explain it, a platform. The platform was probably used to get beer that was up high that they couldn't get. Yeah. So, I don't know. It's just, like we said, you always listen to Bob. You never question him. And, I ended up winning. It was a pretty decent thing. And we got back on the train back. Not once did I say, "Bob, why'd you make me come down here?" It was like, you were so part of the sport and you just wanted to show yourself. Right. And like you said, there was no money involved. It was just that, that training, and you wanted to go there. But like, it's just so funny how, people complain about venues and stuff. And you guys all must have went to these venues. And,
oh, yeah.
Well, you loved it. And, to this day, I still love the whole sport. But
Jerry.
with Bob, it was just an adventure. Places we used to go, Wildwood, and we'd go down to Wildwood. The show would ended at 2:00 in the morning. He has me hitting shots, and I go to hit a shot, and I have this 6-foot trophy, and I hit it, and the thing just splatters. Hey guys, you remember the old trophies? They had like the thing there with the.
They were huge.
But those were adventures that you can never forget.
Never forget East Orange, New Jersey, the Suburban, the Colonial America. It was a YMCA, for crying out loud.
I was just gonna say that, Tommy. That the first Suburban I competed in at the East Orange YMCA.
That was the Colonial America was there too.
It had that upper deck that you.
That's right. It had like a balcony thing going on.
Yeah.
I swear the posing platform was a bunch of wood. What do you call it? Those
crates or something.
Just wood nailed together.
Yeah.
You get up on the platform was shaky. There's a light bulb. It was a light bulb.
A light bulb.
Right. And I'll never forget. And then Dwayne Broadway blew me away in that show, and I didn't know it until the other day when he jumped on the thread. This is 44, 45 years later. He jumped on the thread and said, "Oh yeah, Bob helped me when I was a teenager. He trained me for the shows." And no wonder why I lost. I didn't meet Bob yet, and he trained him for the Teenage Suburban.
John, the bottom line is you never lost to anyone who wasn't being trained by Bob Gruskin. That was it.
I lost like my first 9 contests. I was like, my dad said, maybe you should try like baseball,
Hey, John, this is off subject because I know that John Hansen, you're just a great champion yourself, natural Mr. Olympia. You've got such a great record. I know you didn't have a chance to meet Bob or even train with him, But you must have had some experiences like that with those dungeon-like old, because you go back a few years too.
Yeah.
Your first competition, where was that, man?
My show was in 79, and they had the prejudging at a gym. So they moved all the equipment.
At an actual gym, like a workout gym.
Yeah, we stood against the wall, and the judges were in folding chairs right in front of us.
Oh, my God.
But, speaking of that, Tom, I'm from Chicago. So we would always look at the guys from the East Coast, and we all knew that Gruskin trained them, and everybody, like one of you guys said, the Mr. America was the title. And I came from a gym, Hammer's Gym, and we had Glenn Kinnear there, John Gus. We had a lot of national level guys, Al Kirsch, all these guys were trying to win the America. And I remember one year, I think it was '84, there was like 8 or 10 guys from Chicago all going in there. But we would always be fearful of what was coming from the East Coast. And all the Gruskin's guys, like you said, they all had legs, and we were like, what the fuck is he doing with these guys? They all look amazing, And I think it was Miko that year that won it. So it was and then King the year before, and everybody was, looking at Jeff King like, this guy's unbelievable.
Oh,
yeah. And I remember competing as a teenager one year. I was in the Teenage Midwest, and this guy came out of New York, and Gruskin was training him. He looked just like Mike Quinn. I think it was the year after Mike won the Teenage America. And this guy, I forget what his name was, but he looked just like Mike. And I got second to this guy, and that's what I did meet Bob for a short time. He put me in the magazine Muscle Up. Remember that magazine, Muscle Up?
Muscle Up. He was a big photographer, a writer for Muscle Up. Yeah.
So he gave me a one-page thing in there, one-page interview. So, yeah, but I admire you guys, or I envy you guys that you all got to meet Bob, and he actually trained you, because he was a legend to all of us in Chicago. We all knew of Gruskin's guys. And,
that's so funny, because we didn't know that. We didn't realize anybody else was seeing what was going on, right?
When you look back, from where we're at now, we see things from such a different perspective. And I always tell people, right now you're in a moment that you're going to look at 25 years from now and say, wow, I really had some, the right people around me, and a lot of it at that time, you're so in the moment, you don't realize it. Now we look back and it's just so amazing. But the one thing that Bob did, besides all the millions of things he's done, was to make sure that we were conditioned, that we were ready to get on stage. I mean, every single one of Bob's athletes were the most highly conditioned athletes in the contest.
Yeah.
No matter what show it was. You look at that, and that was Bob's MO. You know what? You in the off season, you train, you try to stay hard, try to stay in reasonable shape. But when it came time for contest, you know what? It all came down to, you're going to get shredded. It's not about size. It's about conditioning,
Yeah.
And that's what it was. We learned that conditioning wins.
You know what? And some people might be listening and saying, like, well, what kind of advice? Give me something specific, right? And there was so much that he would disseminate. And like you said, Jerry, you never argued with it. You never said no. And it wasn't because it was like, oh my God, I don't want to say no, I'm so afraid of Bob. No, it was because you respected him at such a point. You never said no. If he said, we're going here, we're going there, we're going to answer this, we're going to do that, you listened, you just did it. And I remember, and just one very small specific thing, I remember, and I think it was the first, coming back from a long layoff, riding my motorcycles, doing my thing, and then coming back for the Metropolitan Championship that year. And I can't remember what year it was I won the overall, long after John Defendez took that overall title. And I remember I was back to that old diet, it was like tuna fish and nothing. It was like tuna fish and nothing. You know what I mean? It was like, that was it. And maybe if I was lucky, I had some desiccated liver and some brewer's yeast shakes. And it was like, oh my God, the gas was insane. But anyway, I remember Bob taking a look at me, and he advised something that I'd never heard of before, that no one ever had recommended before. He says, you need to add about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 6 ounces of olive oil into your diet.
Yeah.
Olive oil. I was like, well, oil, fat? And again, I didn't question it. But the transformation was phenomenal. What it did, having that essential fatty acid, those omegas into my body at that time, was just absolutely transformational. And it was just that. And this is what Bob did. He was fantastic at disseminating small little things and almost making them not like, he never tried to create a placebo effect. Like, this is going to create unbelievable. Wait till you see the results you're going to get from this thing. Placebo, right? He just said, try it. I want to recommend just do a little olive oil in there, right? And I was like, what? And man, oh man, that's the kind of little things that he would do and say that if you listened, it worked.
Yeah.
He never made the wrong move. Never made the wrong move.
What's
A
that?
little tweak separated you from everybody else.
Right.
It
They
was a
really.
little, do this, add a little of this, and it made the world of a difference.
Mm.
Well, we never
Was it?
question. We never question. You know, unlike today where people are Googling everything and getting on YouTube, and you know, we never ever even considered asking another person what to do. We knew
Yeah.
we had the guy. We listened to him. We respected him. You know.
Yeah.
You know, he always gave us the respect and showed us how much he cared about us. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to make him happy, and the best way to make him happy was to show him that we cared enough and respected him enough to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did Bob have a background in nutrition?
Bob,
Does anybody have a clue?
Well,
You
Bob,
could consider Bob a genius and a doctor.
Bob was so brilliant. I mean, he was a college professor, biology, chemistry.
Okay.
I remember when I'd be at his house, I'd be at his house and he'd say, "Oh, hey, you know, here, I want you to take this test." And I'd be like, "What?" He'd go, "Yeah, you know, I gave this test in my biology class today." And I'm like, I am like not the student. Okay. You know, in high school, I was, you know, I got thrown out of class for writing out workouts during tests, you know, and I actually 3 years ago, a teacher wrote on my page, "I remember you from over 40 years ago. I threw you out of class for writing out workouts during the test." He says, "Hey, it looks like that worked out for you, you know?" And, but the truth is, so I sat down with this test, and it was, thank God it was multiple choice. So I was like going, Bob was over there smoking his cigarette, sitting on his desk, and I'm sitting there, yeah, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, B, C, you know, right now. And then he would look at the test. I had no idea what this test said. I mean, it was so ridiculously difficult, but you know, that was his work. He was brilliant, but
Yeah,
he
he
never
was.
came across. He never tried to impress us with his brilliance. He
Never.
just did what he didn't say, "I'm a college professor. I'm this. I know this." He was just, quite honestly, I was thinking about it today. I think the man was such a genius. His intelligence level was so incredible that he just knew what to do, but he never ever had to convince us, you know, or brag or boast or who he was or what he, you know, the fact he was a college professor. He never came into play, you know.
No.
And and it's just amazing. I've been thinking about it the last 2 days. I've been thinking about Bob a lot because it's so, like Tommy said, so surreal that he's not here.
Yeah.
Because periodically, maybe once a month, I'd call Bob, and you know, it's just the comfort of hearing his voice and you know when he's there, you know. And now he's not there, and I have to say it's very depressing.
Yeah. Now, he worked with you guys when you guys were mostly teenagers. He didn't charge you, right? I mean, this was just all, he just was trying to help you.
No, if
never
anything,
charged-
he
he didn't charge you
paid.
ever.
He
Never
paid
charged.
for stuff. Yeah.
Wow. That's
He
amazing.
paid out of his own pocket for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
He paid
Yeah.
for this admissions, flights, and hotels. He paid
Food.
for a lot. I used
Food,
to feel
everything.
bad. They give me half the money. Let me buy you a ticket.
Yeah. Yeah. I
John,
mean, you think about the way it is now, it's like all these coaches, all these contest prep coaches, these people today, they can't do one show without having a contest prep coach. And
Yeah, I
it's big money for everybody, you know?
I tried to get Tommy to help. He wanted to charge me $500 a month.
That was a retainer, John. That was only a retainer.
You
I was
know?
never going to get you to the contest. It was never going to, that was not that little bit. Are you kidding?
Contest.
That was just
What
to
contest?
evaluate you.
I told Tommy, 2050, I'm coming back.
Oh, man.
2050,
All right.
I'm gonna
around
have
the
a
corner.
pose down.
I'll tell you what.
We're
If
gonna
you're
have a
coming
pose
after me,
down in the Palmetto Senior Center in 2050. You know, I got my trunks already. I bought them last week, and I started my contest prep. I got 30 years.
wait a minute. I think you better turn those trunks in and get some Depends. Is what I'm thinking.
No, but John, getting back to Bob about his generosity. When I
Yeah.
was a teenager, I had a full big basement. Tommy knows I had a big basement.
Oh, man. What
And
a
Bob,
gym you had.
One day a truck pulls up and they say equipment delivery and for John Defendis. And my mother goes, "What's this? What's going on?" And I said, "I don't know." I came out and they got an equipment delivery. I don't know anything about this. It says, "Yeah, it's a gift from Bob Gruskin." right?
No way.
Dude, a whole gym, my whole basement had equipment in it, leg extension machine, hack squat machine, squat rack. I mean, a lat pull down machine. A whole setup. This guy didn't even tell me, surprised me with, you know?
Jeez.
Unbelievable.
And that's the kind of guy he was, you know?
Yeah.
It's
And I will tell you this, I'm pissed at Bob for that, because I started training with John in his basement. It almost killed me. Between John's insanity, and this is before he started training with Mahalik. It was insanity already. And then between that and his mother yelling down, opening the door every 5 minutes, turn down that freaking music! But it was a hell of a gym, man. And that's the way Bob. And again, just one quick brief note about the person that Bob was. I remember when my mom. This was later on. My mom had brain surgery. She had a tumor removed, and she was at NYU Hospital. And I would get to visit my mom about twice or 3 times a week or so. Bob was there every time I visited. He had no idea I was coming. I think he might have been there every single day. Yeah. And it wasn't like we were, a super close family, but that's who he was. That's who he just loved the families. He respected them. If he asked someone, Richard, I think you had a story where if he asked someone to go, hey, you want to go to Connecticut? We're going to go to the Connecticut Championship or something. He said, I'm going to call your parents. I'm going to make sure it's okay. He would always respect those boundaries as well. Always. Remember that, guys?
Yep.
Yeah. You know, I tell you nothing with going back to what Tommy said about training in my basement. You know, we had a dartboard in my basement, and we take the darts and we throw it at the dartboard. And I was throwing for Tommy, so I'm trying to get that bullseye, because if I hit the bullseye, he'd have to do 50 reps.
I remember.
So I tell you, we made a game of it. So it's like you throw the dart, and whatever number it's on, that's how many reps the other guy had to do. I wanted to bury him. I was like, every time he threw the dart, I'm like, oh, come on, give me one, Tommy, give me one, And I'm trying to hit the bullseye, and he's right. My mother would yell down, turn the music down. And
we used to play the Allman Brothers. It was so loud. I think that's part of my hearing loss, got to be honest.
and then she would always yell, say, I don't understand. You could lift those weights all night long like that, but I asked you to take out the garbage. It's too much.
I'm recovering, Mom. I'm recovering.
What was it about the legs? Because all you guys had great legs. I mean, what did he do? Did he give you leg training programs, or did he just pick guys who had great genetics for legs, or what happened?
He would take you in the gym and train you. You had this little short, like Tommy said, Jewish man professor, and like I said the other day, he knew how to work every muscle because he was pretty much a doctor of anatomy and physiology, and he knew how everything worked. And it was amazing. And like you said, you never questioned it. You did what he told you, and and he put you through some hard workouts. It was no joke.
Yeah.
You showed you how to isolate the muscles doing the exercise. You were doing squats, and there was a technique to doing the squats. Your ass went to the ground, you flared your quads, you actually flexed your quads through the entire movement. Yeah. When you got to finishing position, you're standing up, you're squeezing your ass cheeks so hard and throwing your outer sweeps out, you're going to dislocate your hips. That's why we all had humongous outer sweeps.
Yeah, and he was the guy I learned isotension from. That it wasn't just about doing the movement. It was about deliberately engaging the muscle throughout the movement, at the top, at the very bottom, and even resisting the weight on the way down. And he was the guy I learned that from. Concentration curls? Oh, my God. I'll never forget a concentration curl session with him.
We all knew how to train. I see these kids, they don't know it's the fucking thing how to train.
Right.
We knew how to do all the movements. Like, it was almost natural for us. And you try to go up to a kid and they're like, look at you like, well, how many followers do you have? Like, I'm going to listen to you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But we all knew how to train. Like, and he taught us. And that, it was just amazing how, we knew how to perform every movement, the squat, the deadlift, the bench.
The funniest thing was when you would tell Bob, even now, like, who's that guy in the picture with you? I go, that was my coach. What?
I so unassuming, man.
A little fat Jewish guy looks like Mario Brothers, and I would say, that guy would kill you in the gym, and he trained more champions than you'll ever think about, dream about. He has more title holders than you can count in a million years.
Incredible.
And that's another thing I've been thinking about the last 2 days again, was when you really look at things, really look at things, and you count the champions, not Weider, not Charles Glass, not any one of these people, not any one of them has a record like Bob has.
Nope.
And the only reason that nobody knows that or realizes that is because Bob didn't want that. Bob wanted it to be about us, not about him. And that's unbelievable. And the more I think about it, the more it just man, I feel it in my heart. The last 2 days. Go ahead, Richie. I'm sorry.
And let us have our day.
Yeah.
It was always about us. Always.
Absolutely. The level of humility doesn't really exist much these days, you know. Bob's he never needed, even to the last minute, he didn't need accolades, he didn't need the recognition, he never wanted the spotlight. I remember, John, because I had dropped out of touch with Bob, sadly, for some time, and then we got on the phone together with Bob about a year or so ago, and even then he was just so humble and just like, yeah, like it was nothing. I didn't really do anything. I didn't really, just like he didn't want to take any credit. It was like I bled my heart. I was like, man, you had such an influence on it. I wanted to thank you and just say, I know I never had a chance, and now I realize the importance of the role you played in my life. And he was just like, just very downplayed it. He accepted it. He was humble in accepting it, But man, it just wasn't. It was his rewards, and it's so interesting because today we see an environment, millennials and everything, that's more, it's all about extrinsic reward. Bob Gruskin was all about intrinsic. Whatever he was getting rewarded, whatever his soul was absorbing that he took into the afterlife with him, that was reward enough. Intrinsic was all he needed. He didn't need anything outside, anything. And it's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's like my phone call last week with Bob. I said, Bob, how you doing? You're okay? And he didn't want to. Hey, how's Lisa? How's you? You doing good? Everything going well? You've been training. I'm like, well, Bob, I'm concerned about you. How you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I mean, right down to the very end. He didn't want it to be about him. Yeah, yeah. But I want to go back for a second because, John, you asked that question. I know Richard answered it pretty well we all did in terms of what Bob taught us in terms of the training, because, and again, somebody listening be like, well, what did he do? Again, what is specific? The oil, the little advice and stuff like that. But that training, to be in the gym with you and take you through an understanding. I mean, it was just like we became anatomy, physiology experts. Every single one on this call and every single champion that he helped build has more knowledge of the body, how it works, how it functions in our little finger. And again, I'm not putting down today's athletes than most of the greatest athletes today in the bodybuilding world, have, because again, they're depending on someone else. We learn these things, these on a molecular level, just by osmosis being around Bob Gruskin. We became knowledgeable, and many of us have become great coaches as a result of that. And we use the same coaching strategies in many respects that Bob taught us, And and so that has served us along the way as well. But the knowledge that he disseminated made us all experts in many respects.
When Bob looked at you guys when you were younger and stuff and your physiques were developing, could he tell? I mean, he was obviously a good judge also, right? He could look at you guys and say, you need this, you need that, and then he would help you get there, right? Help you, bring up your weak points.
Yes.
Yeah, he was right to the point. He didn't hold anything back.
Oh, yeah. Bob would tell you. If something was weak, he would tell you, too. I want
to interrupt you, but you had a great interview. The interview with Dave Palumbo last night. I love Dave very much. Long Island boy, one of my dear friends. He talked about this great story where another mutual friend of ours, Dougie Wentz, who was a great East Coast champion himself, another guy with freaking legs. Dougie ran into it. He was another bouncer, and he ran into a bottle and got pretty messed up. Yeah. But anyway, Dougie was a great champion, and he introduced Bob. He brought Dave Palumbo to Bob's house. And as Dave tells the story, he was there to see, what kind of potentials does he have? Is he going to be good? Could he make it? Is he not going to make it? And he was already pretty damn good bodybuilder. Gnarly. If you know Dave Palumbo, he was gnarly, like a monster, like a beast. You know what I mean? He was already beastly at the time. And he's posing for Bob. He's down in front of that mirror. And I'm sure like a fraction of his body actually could be seen in the mirror, you know. And he politely asked Dougie, go upstairs, get yourself something to eat, get yourself something to drink real quick, you know. And so he dismissed Dougie out of the way, and he told Dave Plummer, he goes, go back to medical school. You need to go back to school. And Dave's like, why? What do you mean? He goes, I don't think you have what it takes to place high in any national show. You won't make it. Go back to school. And then the final words he said to him, he goes, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. And Dave Plummer was really one of the only guys that Bob Gruskin, with his brutal honesty, actually proved Bob wrong, because Dave was a great champion in himself. Yeah. But he was honest. He was always honest. If he said, you know what, you got a career somewhere else, you should be doing something like you did with you, Richard. You had a career opportunity. You could have been a Mr. Olympia competitor. Look at you, you motherfucker. You're huge, right? Could have been. You had legs. Could have been a Mr. Olympia competitor. But would that have served you the way your career did in the police force?
I had to take the opportunity when it presented itself, because how many times does opportunity present itself at the right time? Mm-hmm. If I would have bypassed the acceptance letter from the police department, and I would have went and did the Mr. America and lived the dream, what's next? What would have been next? I mean,
right.
Would I have gotten another call from the police department? You don't know. It's that what if. I what if myself for years. I what if. Man, I wish I'd have just done the America, and I would have got on the job a year later. But what if? I beat myself up for years about the what if. I don't have any.
I'm glad you took that road, because I just hearing your voice say pull around to the window. I just I smell the odor of marijuana coming out.
Plus, there's a good chance that John and I would have had to encounter you on stage at some point, and that wouldn't have been good for us.
Yeah. I don't know how I skated by Jerry Scalisi. I mean, Tommy beat me. I skated by Jay. I never had to compete against Jerry. I never had to compete again against. I think Kacharik beat me when I was a teenager. I think when I was a teenager, everybody in the country beat me.
And yet you evolved into John Defendez, Mr. USA, one of the greatest bodybuilders that has ever lived, without question. Again, some of those defeats made you who you are, man.
No, there's no question. The losses, I never wanted to feel that. The pain that I felt when I was at the Suburban and my friends told me I won after the prejudging, and I was standing on the side of the stage and the clipboard. He said, "Will the top 3 competitors come out on stage?" I think it was Casey, it was Dwayne Broadway, and somebody else. And I told the guy, "I'm sorry, excuse me, I made a mistake." It's and the guy looked at the clipboard, and he says, "What's your name?" I said, "Defendez. You're supposed to be out there." He says, "I'm sorry, son, you didn't make the cut." I said, "No, I won the show. My friends told me." I'm like, "Hey, Bobby, hey, tell him." I'm like, "Bobby, tell him." Ask Bobby. And so the guy goes, "No, I'm sorry, son." And I stood there like Carrie. Remember Carrie in the movie? Like, you might as well have dumped the blood on me. I'm standing there like, four guys. I drove 2 hours to watch 3 guys beat me out of the 4 guys that were in the class.
Wow.
And you know what? I always call that a defining moment.
Yes.
That moment, that's a moment I never wanted to feel again for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And of course, I felt it a couple weeks later when Tommy beat me. But but at least I got called out and I took second.
That's right.
Matter of fact, I was so excited that I took second to Tommy that I had a celebration party for Tommy the next day at my house, where I brought Deli Heroes over there. I had Carvel ice cream, and I celebrated Tommy's victory. I got the picture. I posted on Facebook once in a while just to remind me of that son of a bitch. He beat me. I've been chasing that bitch for 40
That is
years.
absolutely true. This is so true.
I'm chasing him. Right?
Yeah, he had a party. I'll never forget it. We had Heroes and we had ice cream. And I was like, I was a bit dumbfounded. I was like, and honest to God, listen, I had the first time you walked into Future Man Gym with Bob Gruskin, and I was introduced to this monster. What I didn't share about that part of the story was that, I've been relatively complacent. I was training hard. I was under the tutelage. I wasn't really under Bob's tutelage yet. And that was about to evolve. But I was under the tutelage of Tony Pandolfo, a great champion himself, Mr. New York, Masters, Mr. America. And great guy. He passed away a few years. God rest his soul. And so when John walked in, and first thing that happened was I was demoralized. I'm like, this fucking guy, he's huge. He's a monster. He's like, oh, my God. And Bob introduces him at my competition. I didn't want to go back, like I said. But what it did do, it was motivate him. And this was Bob's brilliance. He knew how to be so subtle about, these introductions and these things were just like, you knew there was you always knew. And this is one of the things that I've worked with as a coach, very few bodybuilding athletes over the years, very selective about it. Because I know, especially today's, day and age, it's like, it's just not something I want to do per se. But I've worked with very few and certainly, what I've been able to do in the past with these guys is the same thing Bob did with me, which was get them motivated, make them realize there's somebody nipping at your heels right now. You think you're training hard? There's somebody training harder. You think you're dieting hard? There's somebody dieting harder right now. And John and Bob introduced me to that guy, and it was the next day that was like, holy shit, I gotta up my game. Mm-hmm. And for the next 6 or 8 weeks or so, I upped that game to the point where it's just like I barely edged by John. I mean, one of the greatest bodybuilders ever lived. I barely edged by the guy. You know what I mean? As a teenager. If you look at those pictures, I think there's still a question. I might have had a couple of those judges in my pocket.
No. Your legs were so superior to mine at that time. And I tell you something, and this is the God honest truth. That was 43 years ago. 43 years ago. 43 years, and I'm telling you.
Just slap me in the face.
43 years I've been chasing this guy, and no matter what the fuck he does it better than me. And it pisses me off. You see him out there, I do a live video on Facebook. I'm like, yeah, then I watch Tom. It's like, he's got fucking special effects. He's got hands. Hey, let me tell you, special effects. Yeah, bring the lions in over here, the zebras. Yeah, it's like you got all kind of shit going on that no matter what I do, no matter how I up my game, I'm still chasing them. That's
you're the guy. You're the guy I got to stay one step ahead of, man.
Hey, 2050 Palmetto Senior Center. I'm telling you, you're going down.
You guys are the witness. You guys are the witnesses. This is it.
I'm going to contact Bob one way or the other. I'm going to do a seance, whatever I got to do.
Remember, if Bob is training you, he's training me too, man. I mean, it's just how it works. You know what I mean? It was like up against the other. But Bob sent me to a contest. I forget, as a teenager, and I was winning, won the Teenage Metropolitan and a couple other shows. And again, he was so brilliant at helping us learn these lessons that we needed to have. He talked me into going, and I kind of knew I needed a haircut. I remember shaving my legs in the back of the car on the way to the contest, right? I put on copper tone. I was like copper tone tanning it on the way to the contest. He sent me to this contest in Connecticut. He said, yeah, you can do well. You can do well. You got to go to this contest, right? So I went with my brother, my twin brother, and my dad, and it was it, right? And one of the reasons I wanted to go because Sergio Oliva was guest posing, right? I don't know if it was Mr. Connecticut or what it was, but I wanted to see Sergio Oliva.
What year was that, Tom?
What's that?
What year was that?
The 77 was the Mets. So it must have been 78. It was like after the Mets. And so he got me. He talked me into going. Bob talked me into going. And I got there, and literally, like John, it was like last place. A guy named Pete Leonetti, who was a teenager. I think he just won the Teenage America.
Hard as a rock.
Hard as a freaking rock. You've never seen abs like this. I don't know what happened to Pete.
Abs and legs. He had abs and legs like
unbelievable. His back was narrow. Even today, I can recognize some of his weaknesses. But it's just like I got crushed. I got completely crushed. And Bob was there, of course, and I didn't want to go back that night. And this is an interesting experience that I had with one of the athletes I worked with last year. Is I didn't want to go back that night. And Bob says, you made a commitment. You're in the contest. You go back.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. So I went back and I faced my humiliation. You know what I mean? It was just like, it could have been done over the prejudging. I could have went out for ice cream, went into the pool and said, forget about it. But I went back that night because Bob's encouraged me to go back. He knew the lesson. He knew what we needed. We needed a humbling. He must have seen I got cocky after beating the freaking John Defenders. I mean, he's like, who would be cocky? Right? I mean, I was like, arrogant as shit. And he says, you need a humbling. You need to go get your ass kicked. And that's exactly what happened. On the upside, I got to meet Sergio Oliva, another inspiration. So between the two, it was a tremendous inspiration that made all the difference in the world going forward.
You know, what's really amazing, though, about Bob, I hear from all you guys, is, you know, he was so passionate about the sport. He took his time to help all you guys and many others, but he was always realistic about the sport and said that you guys need to also concentrate on other things, have a career. And like telling you, Tom, you got to go back to the night show. You got to face that.
Yes.
So it was like all these life lessons. And, you know, that's amazing that he was that passionate about it, but he was always encouraging you, like Richard, you know, to go for another career instead.
Mm.
You know, let me tell you a little story real quick. Was we went to the Region 1 in Massachusetts in the 70s. And my friend John Farina said, hey, you know, I'd love to go, you know, see you compete, you know. So I was like, you know, cool. You know, John worked out a little bit, but not really. He's played baseball, had other sports, but wasn't a bodybuilder at all. So we get to the Region 1, and, you know, I trained all year for this contest. And they go, so, you know, Bob's, you know, finding out how, you know, how many people are in my class. And everyone's like, hey, how many people got in your class, you know? And there were 4 people in my class and 5 trophies.
That was always a relevant question. Remember that, guys?
Yeah.
How many guys are in your class? Like,
so Bob.
And it was only 3 place in winnings.
Bob comes out. I'm standing backstage, you know, getting ready to pump up. This is like right before the prejudging, and Bob turns to John. He goes, "Hey, take your shit off. I got some posing trunks here. You're gonna get in the show." And John goes, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm gonna get you in the show." I swear to God, I kid you not. He has John stripped down, put the pose trunks on, Dioderm. He's Dioderming him, right? The guy is, we had to shave him down. This is an Italian guy that's hairy, backstage with a razor, electric. The hair's came off, right? And he's throwing the Dioderm on him. I'm sitting there going, what the hell, right? John's got the posing trunks on. Even though with the Dioderm, he's still got the tanning line from his shorts, right? So he's got the posing trunks with the white legs, you know, and the Dioderm. He goes out there. Of course, he took 5th. He took last in the class. There was 5 guys. He's out there. I got the picture. I post it all the time on Facebook every time I want to get back at him. And, you know, and so he comes home. He takes 5th because there's 5 guys. I won the show. And this was a big show, too. So we go home and we go back to his house and we go in and his mother goes, oh, how did John do? He goes, oh, forget John. I took 5th. Look, Mom, I got a trophy.
Took 5th. Man.
You're not even a bodybuilder. Yeah, but look at my trophy. I took 5th. I'm like, so then after that, it was always like, hey, how you doing your show? I won. And then John be like, yeah, I took 5th. And people going, wow, must have been a real shitty show. John actually looked decent. For a guy that didn't compete, he actually looked decent, though.
Yeah.
You know what I remember about Bob? All of the people I've met through him, through all the different gyms we used to go to, the different competitions, and he'd introduce you. And he made a point to introduce you to people and say, Richie, this is so-and-so. Richie, this is Jeff King, Joe DeAngelis, Jerry, Johnny, Tom. All of these people that you've met 35 plus years ago, and you're all still a family. We all still keep in touch. Myself and Dougie Wentz were training partners years ago. We were 2 top teenage dogs back in the day. Dougie and I are pretty much the same age, a year apart. Never competed against each other. Always trained hard with each other. And to this day, we're still friends. And I haven't seen Dougie in over 20 years. And Joe DeAngelis, I was almost making that trip to California with Joe DeAngelis and Frankie Vassell back in the day. And the police department called. And I spoke to Joe DeAngelis up until 2 days before he passed away. For 30 years. I've kept in touch with people. We're just a brotherhood. It's just such a big, tight, close-knit family of all the guys that Bob has introduced you to.
Yeah.
Is so much alike you.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
all so much alike each other, but a little different in each other, in different ways. But it's all the same pretty much, personality-wise and sense of humor, and it's just it's incredible.
Bob would never have it. He would never put up for any of us disrespecting each other ever. I mean,
absolutely not. Absolutely not.
He
would turn your back on you.
That's the example that he set, and that example is what we followed. And quite honestly, my best friends are this group of people and the people I grew up in high school with, and the loyalties that we had growing up. Times have changed so much. We've come into this era of everything's instant and everybody's about themselves and me, and selfies, and that people don't understand the way we grew up, the loyalties. And if I got your back, you got my back. Now it's like I got your back while you're stabbing me in my back. It's like it's a whole different mentality now. But we grew up in an era, and I'm so blessed, and not only to have Bob have been in our lives, but we grew up in an era where bodybuilding was about camaraderie. We were competing against each other, but we still trained together and we cared about each other. And, when you got there, you competed and you wanted to win, but at the same time, you were still just like, me having Tommy over my house. I'm celebrating the guy who beat me. I mean, you couldn't
oh,
see
come
that.
on. What you were trying to do is fatten me up. Ice cream, cupcakes. I mean, come on. We know exactly what your ulterior motive was.
I was surprised. What surprised me is that I didn't put enough rat poisoning in that sandwich.
I was sick the next couple of days. I couldn't explain it.
I mean, I should have went. I'm telling you, I should have went with the strychnine. The rat poison was too weak.
I mean, it is true. I mean, when you think about the brotherhood back in those days, again, we were all of us were slightly post. You talk about and who didn't grow up? John Hanson, I know you did. I know that Jerry, everyone, we all grew up in many respects early on in our bodybuilding careers, looking at those pictures from Artie Zella that used to shoot of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Franco and all those guys on the West Coast, right? And that was like a brotherhood we saw out in that Gold's Gym. And in many respects, we created this, not we, but Bob created this brotherhood on the East Coast in many respects of guys that wound up training with each other, working with Jerry and I have a background. Probably your listeners would never know this, but Jerry and I used to bounce we talked about this off the air. Jerry and I used to bounce at some, like probably the preeminent rock and roll club back in the 70s, 80s, Hammerheads, right? I mean, Long Island was the rock and roll freaking mecca, and we were bouncing at these like hardcore biker and rock clubs, man. Jerry and I have some experiences together in that respect, and we were introduced by Bob, and so it's like these personal relationships that evolved around that, and it all had to do with Bob. It all centered around him in many respects, didn't it?
Jerry, I love that. I love that picture you put on Facebook not too long ago, where you had a group of guys and you all went to the Night of the Champions.
Yeah, that was probably. I would say that. Well, Robbie won the first 2 years, 77.
Yeah.
Robbie Robinson.
Yeah, it was definitely one of them because. Quinn was only maybe 19, and Jeff wasn't that old.
Yeah.
So I think it might have been like 78. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, but it was a great pit of Conzo brothers, Dan Morrow, and Peter Neff.
Yeah.
With Bob leading us all in the street of New York.
God, you just mentioned Peter Neff. I forgot about Peter.
Yeah.
Peter never had the greatest upper body, but god dang, did he have some legs, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was a Bob guy.
Yeah. Peter was from up there, Westchester, I think.
Yeah.
Another thing too that we forgot to mention is the exposure that Bob gave us in the magazines. I mean, Muscle Up, Bodybuilder, Muscle Mag International. I mean, Bob was writing. He was writing. Wrote hundreds and hundreds of articles for all those publications, did the photography.
And Bob was the head judge with the NPC too. People forget that.
Yeah.
At one time. People forget that.
Yeah. But
his photography really helped make a lot of us. Yeah.
And you know what? Another thing too is we grew up at an incredible time. And I was talking to my girlfriend Lisa about this the other day, is the excitement to know you're on a magazine cover or in a magazine where
Yeah.
you run to the store. I would get the date, March 8th, the magazine hits. I'd be there. The boxes are piled up. I'd say, I'm here. You get the magazine. Well, we haven't unloaded. I was unpacking boxes and helping them put the magazines on the shelf. I remember I was promised Bob got me the cover of what do you call it? Muscle Up.
Muscle Up.
No, there was Muscle Digest. He got me the cover of Muscle Digest, right? And it was 6 months in advance. This is going to come out in February. You're going to be on the cover and everything, right? And I ran to the store. I found out exactly the date it was coming out. I went there. I waited. The guy opened up the boxes, and they only have like 4 magazines of each magazine. And I got the magazine, and I was on the cover. My picture was about 1.5 inches big, and Samir Banood had the entire cover, right?
You were the little guy.
So Samir Banood had the whole cover. And I was friends with Samir. I met Samir in '79. We trained at Gold's Gym in Venice, the original Gold's Gym. I met him there. He posed for me under the skylight. We became friends. So the magazine comes out, and Samir's got the whole cover. I got this 1-inch tiny picture, and then I seen it, and my heart sunk. And the inside back cover was the insert. It had my whole back inside back cover of the little pictures on the front. So I bought 2 copies. The other 2 copies, I turned it around and put it back on the rack. And I told Samir this. I posted on Facebook. I said, I'm sorry, Samir, but I turned the cover around, so you actually didn't have the cover of that issue. I still had the cover, and Samir's forgiven me, because he knows I always tell him how awesome he is.
Yeah, he's cool. Samir Banood, Mr. Olympia. Yeah, but you remember that, Jerry? I mean, and John, the first time, it could have been any magazine. I remember it was like a series called The Upcoming or something, right?
Yep.
Rising
Star.
Like a little picture was like this big of Tom Terwilliger. I'm like, I couldn't believe it. It was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
It meant the world when you had your first picture in the magazine, man.
Yeah.
Hey guys, when I was in high school, which was way back when, I think it was about 74, 75. I was one of the few people training, and the school library got like Muscle Mag in. And
What?
let's face it, no one in the mid-70s was reading Muscle Mag. So I used to go into the library and take my notebook. I would get the magazine, take it out, and I would take it from the library. Every month I would take the issue out, knowing that nobody ever knew that it was gone. And I remember, John, you would notice, I think the first one had Dave Draper's arm workout in it.
Dave was the Bob, man. That was it for me.
Yeah. But even when the Olympia was ran, I would call goals in California to see who won. Nobody knew.
Everybody did that. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody knew, remember?
Monday morning. Yeah.
No, it was great showing up at shows, and you didn't know who was there.
Yeah.
Well, know, the guy in the tracksuit suit that was lean, he was going to win the show.
All I know,
you can see the face, right?
Yeah.
You know what Bob used to do? Bob used to do this thing where he'd come up behind you, and he'd like feel your lower back. You know what I mean? He'd like feel your lower. He knew as soon as he touched your lower back if you were in shape or not. You know what I mean?
Pinch your back.
Yeah.
He would pinch your back.
all I know is next week, Jerry, don't be calling me collect next week asking me for bail money when they pick you up for the magazines you stole.
Hey, John, I got to be honest. I was surprised to hear you had a girlfriend at all. I'm like, how is a woman possibly putting up with this? It's time to start ranking on each other, guys. It's starting getting boring.
No, you're talking to me? Hey, you're talking to me? You married Dawn like 3 times your pay scale?
Well, listen, it cost me a hell of a lot. I'm not going to tell you, man.
You don't have to tell me about it costing a lot. That comes with the territory.
Guys, let's wrap this up because I know we could be here all night. Let's just go down the list and go down the line and just sort of tell us what Bob meant to you. I know it's probably a difficult question, but let's just it's like one last tribute to him.
I hate to start that with so let me start again. It is interesting that I don't know until we know that the saying goes, you never know what you have until it's gone. And honestly, I have a hard time even thinking about Bob and what he meant to me without like choking up a little bit and without a tear coming to my eye, because he was just such an incredible impact on my life. I mean, it just, I didn't even realize it until he was gone, how much of an influence and how brilliant he was and how honored I should have been and still am today of him taking any even kind of remote interest in this punk ass kid from Massapequa, Long Island. Who was I? You know what I mean? And he saw something that I didn't even see in myself. And he helped me see that. He helped me begin to create a vision. He never practiced or utilized visualization, but he helped us create a vision of something more compelling than where we were, who we were at that moment. And that is absolutely invaluable. So Bob's not only his influence, but his character, his mentorship, his training has influenced almost everything. I mean, it goes so beyond the bodybuilding and the training and even the spirituality of it. It's just, it's something that I'm honored and have really, truly been privileged to have Bob in my life. I have him interested in who I was and to help me become who I became. And he'll be missed. He'll be sorely missed greatly. Greatly.
How about you, Richard?
Bob was like a second father to me. And over the years, his guidance, not just for myself, but for my brother Scott also. My brother Scott helped Bob as he got older.
Yes.
And he really stepped up to the plate with Bob when he had his first surgery. And Bob had a shunt put in his head. My brother was there at the hospital. I was in Florida. I just couldn't leave. I had work commitments that I couldn't get out of. My brother really stepped up to the plate and was there for Bob through all of his surgeries. Judging NABBA shows. Bob was the president of NABBA USA. My brother was there running shows with Bob, judging the shows with Bob. And all the way down to the very end, 35 years plus that I've known Bob, it was the Christmas cards, the birthday cards, the hello phone calls, how are you doing, the meals we spent together, just enjoying each other's time. I mean, if it wasn't for Bob, and I can speak for my brother also, we would have never made the decisions in life that brought us to be the people or the persons that we are. And the people that I've met through this man, it's just, words just can't describe it. Do I miss him? I miss him dearly. He was my Jewish daddy, and I love the man to death. He's done so much for me. Thank you is not a word that expresses how much gratitude I have for him. Thank you is just not enough. And he never took anything for granted. You could see the twinkle in his eye when you said, Bob, thank you so much for everything you've done for me. You see how it affected him. He really enjoyed to see the look of you being happy because it made him happy.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I miss him terribly. I'm so sorry that he's gone, but it's the cycle of life. It is. We're all going to be gone someday.
Right.
But will anyone touch my life as much as he did? I don't think so. He's really made it, I can't even speak the words. He's really made an impact on my life. He really has. And I miss him dearly. I really do.
Hey, John, how about you?
Well, I turned on my computer and I just clicked on Facebook for a second. I just want to show you what came up. Can you guys see that?
Oh, yeah.
The mirror.
Basement.
It's the famous mirror.
Yeah.
And
mirror, and I'm giving that mirror to Johnny Defendis here within the next couple of months.
What?
Yes.
That belongs in the Smithsonian.
Well, yeah. Well, you want to know something? We spoke about that. We want to see if we get it in the Bodybuilding Hall of Fame because it belongs there.
That would be brilliant.
That or I'm going to use it when I'm getting ready for that 2050 because I know if I got that mirror and I just say mirror on the wall.
No, that is an unfair advantage. No way, man. No way.
There's still magic in that mirror.
So let me say this. First, I'd like to thank Scotty Scotty Palatano, because him going in and getting the files out and sending me the files, sending us the files of our pictures throughout our life. But what was more important than the pictures, there were pictures that Scotty sent me that were in Bob's files that not only do I not remember taking the pictures, or not only do I not, that I'd never seen the pictures, but some of them I didn't remember taking because Bob always had you on the go, you know? And, you know, Bob would do really fucked up shit. Like, I remember he's in the basement. I was getting ready for the show, and he's taking pictures. And, you know, Bob would take the pictures because you had to pose really hard. And he'd have you pose for hours, and he had me pose and pose and pose and pose. Then I seen him go turn around, and he opened up his camera. I go, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, I'm going to put some film in now." I said, "What?" I said, "What? I thought you had film in there." He goes, "No, I just wanted you to pose so we get the water out of you, get you tight, you know?" And he had me pose. He had me pose for probably an hour with no film. And, you know, you want to look good for the camera, so you're like, "Hit it hard, hard." You know, I'm hitting that pose. And, you know, I'm trying, no, smile. No, don't grimace. No, you got to put your hand up. I know. You put your legs out so you got more of a sweep. No, you got to do that. And he's taking pictures. And I just go, I'm thinking, my God, I'm going to have the best pictures. I'm in the best shape of my life. And then he goes to put the film in. Right? And it was a trick I learned, and I used that later on my guys. But what meant more to me than the pictures. And, you know, and I hope Stephanie Gruskin, his niece, gets a chance to see, you know, I know she's watched the other videos with her parents, Bob's brother. And I hope she gets to see this and really get some insight on to see that her uncle was probably one of the greatest men who ever walked this earth and ever cared about anybody. The guy gave his heart and soul to every one of us. And what really got me with my file was I opened that file. And, you know, you don't remember back. This is going back over 40 years. And there were hundreds of letters. And I'm not joking when I say hundreds of letters and cards that I wrote to Bob over this span of time. And that span pretty much went from the 70s till pretty much the 90s, because I was writing to him all the time. You know, this in the 70s, it was $5 a minute to call from Arizona to New York. So we didn't make long distance calls. We wrote letters, you know, and we mailed those letters. And it took a week to get there, whatever, you know. But I sat down the other day and I read these letters and I was crying. I had tears in my eyes and this aching in my heart, because every single letter I wrote just said, I can't believe how much you care and what you've done for me. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I have never read so many thank you letters. And I kept saying, you know, I have to win. I have to become Mr. America was my goal. Only you can help me get there. I know you can help me get there. And everything you've done has brought me to this point. And thank you, thank you, thank you. And the letters just expressed how important he was to me, and how a lot of people didn't know this, but from training with Mahalik was a perfectionist. He was never good enough, and he made it where I was never good enough. He never ever told me I was good. He never told me you've arrived or you've done this. All those years I trained with Mahalik, almost 6 years. And what I got from Mahalik was, you know, oh, do you think you're a bodybuilder? You're a fucking skeleton with a wig. You have no muscles. Look, you look like a coat hanger in that picture. That's what Mahalik would say. You know what? And people today, and, you know, I've had a lot of people tell me he was abusive, he was this, he was that. I said, no, that's the way it was. And he was telling me the way he had to tell me. But Bob was the guy that held me together. Steve was the guy that broke me down. Bob was the guy that built me up. And he didn't build you up in a false way. He didn't bullshit you. But he was never afraid to tell you when you did good or when you looked good, or hang in there, hold it together. We'll get you there. Don't worry about it. He was the voice of reason.
Yes,
and
he was.
He was so, when he spoke, it would give you a peace, a calmness, knowing that it's all going to be okay. You're going to get there, and you're going to be in shape on that day of the show, and it's all going to work out. That's how Bob was, but he wouldn't bullshit you. He would tell you exactly, and as long as you listen to him, Don't worry. Just listen. You got to listen to what I'm telling you. Here's what you got to do, you know? But every letter that I wrote consistently said, I need you. You hold me together. You make me believe in myself that I can do this. And, you know, at times where I don't think I'm good enough, you give me the confidence to go on, because Steve didn't do that. Steve played a part, and a very important part. But if I didn't have Bob, I would have never, ever, ever, ever won the USA. And there were so many letters after the USA. It said that right in the letter. I would have never won that show without you. God put you on this planet to help all of us. And he did his job when it came to me, and he got me there, and he allowed me to accomplish my lifelong goal. And without Bob Gruskin, that wouldn't have happened. Absolutely no way that would have happened. And Bob, I'm sure you're looking down on us and you're going, well, you guys need to shut up. You need to stop talking about me. You know?
He wouldn't like what we're doing.
He don't
right
want
now.
us to talk about him. He doesn't. But I tell you, at the same time, I know he's feeling us right now, and he knows he did good, you know? And I hope that when he got up to the pearly gates, you know, God put his hand on him and said, you know, job well done. Well done, son. You did good, you know? And I know that's how it went.
Yeah.
I agree.
Jerry?
Well, Bob was like that angel on your shoulder. Whether you had a great day or you were in a dark place, he always assured you that everything was going to be all right. And it's funny, when Bob passed, the first one I called was my mom. My mom's 93. I actually called her at 10 at night and woke her up. And, you know, I told her Bob passed, and she was upset because, I mean, Bob was part of my family. Hold on. Sorry, guys.
That's right.
No, you feel it. You feel it too.
He was part of my family, and I used to pick him up on a Sunday and bring him out to Sunday dinner. He loved eating at my house, and I would bring him back to the Bronx. Sometimes he would stay a week, a weekend, and you know, it's hard to replace someone like that. And he was just all our life. He touched everybody, and you know, like I wouldn't be where I am without him. I mean, this man would be up at 11, 12 o'clock at night after you finished the gym, and he would say, "Come over, I have to take a look at you." And you drive up there, and he didn't have to do this. You know, he would open the door, he would feed you. It would be 12:30 at night. And like you said, he never wanted anything. And he's going to be missed. You know, just talking to him on the phone, like John said, he would ask you how you're doing. He would never tell you how he was doing.
Yeah.
And that's it. I can't really talk much more.
You know, this, I just want you guys to see this. Can you see that on the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that was Bob taping my arm when I was just 16 years old. And again, taping my arm, you know, pointing to my arm in the 90s. The first picture was in the mid 70s. Second picture was in the 90s when I went up to New York to judge a contest at NABA show.
Cool.
And, you know, it's just, you know, looking back on that, I remember I was just so happy I had somebody that took an interest in me and was there to help me go after my goal. Jerry, I can understand you breaking down. I've cried enough tears the last couple of days. It's just looking through all the stuff over and over again. And I'm so thankful again for Richard and Scotty for getting me those files, because those memories will go all the way to the grave with me, and I'll be looking at them all the way the rest of my life, because those memories are the greatest memories of my entire life.
All right, guys. Well, listen, I want to thank all of you guys for joining us for the special tribute to all you guys. And I thought it was, I know we're all here late on a Friday night talking about them, so I appreciate you guys all taking the time to do this. Tom Terwilliger, John Defendis, Jerry Scalisi, and Richard Pelletano, I appreciate all you guys giving this tribute to Bob Gruskin, one of the real great gurus in the sport, a very special person. And this was fun, guys. I'm glad we were able to get together and share these memories, and I think Bob would appreciate it. And it was great having all you guys who were so close to him come on here and do this for us.
Thank you, John. Greatly appreciate you, John. Appreciate you doing it for us.
Yeah, we appreciate it, John. Thank you for
Thanks
getting
a lot,
this done,
John.
man. You know, we really appreciate it. And I'm sure Bob is honored by it. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, I look forward to having you guys on the show again. Hopefully one day soon. And it was great talking to all of you and great seeing everybody. And God rest Bob Gruskin's soul, right?
You got it.
Thank you, Bob.
Blessings. Love you guys. All of you.
Love you guys.
Love you, man. Love you guys. Appreciate all of you. Thanks,
right.
Rich.
Take care, guys.
I'll be in touch.